Hello and welcome to Universus. Today we're going to be doing a follow-on from our deck building video where we're going to be going a little bit more in-depth into the contents of the deck. The first video was more about building your deck and having the right ratio of attacks and foundations, but as people quite rightly pointed out, there were some things that I did not cover. And this is because I wanted that video to just be about having the ratios in your deck, making sure that you had 20 attacks, 40 foundations, and you understood that making your deck was supposed to be fun for you as your first deck, and that you are able to understand that the progressive difficulty of building and playing and what you need to have in your deck. So welcome to what to do next. And we're going to be covering the compromises and the changes and all the additional things that then goes into deck building once you've got used to your deck. So you've built your first deck, you found a character you found fun, you found a card interaction you found fun, and you found cards that you wanted to put into your deck that you believe pushed your character's game plan and pushed what you wanted to do in the deck. But you're running into walls. It may not be that you're checking poorly, it may not be that your attacks aren't doing what they're supposed to, it could just be that you're not getting the damage through, you're not blocking properly, you're just running into walls with your deck because although your deck is fun and it's balanced from a check value point of view, it's not balanced in the other aspects of the game. So what do I mean by the compromises you make in decks? Well, I touched on it slightly in other videos where you're looking about asset hate and action hate and having to take cards out of your deck and put other cards in that specifically deal with what your opponent's trying to do and not what you're trying to do. So let's start off with the easy one. Attack. When you're playing, your deck will be filled with actions, assets, foundations, and attacks, and as well as backups if you choose to run them. Attacks are the lifeblood of your game plan. It's generally how most people win their game if you're not running one of these very fringe kind of Nezu mill decks. Attacks have a cost, a check value, an attack zone, a block zone, and a damage value and a speed value. Now, it's a good rule of thumb when you're just starting out, have a range of attack zones. There are some characters such as Ibarra and Ochako 4, as well as other characters that do care about the attack zones you're playing, and then you do have other cards such as Falling Skies, which does interact with the fact that you need to be running all highs. So if you're running those characters and you run that kind of strategy, that's fine. The main issue is if you just run an entire zone, you run into the wall of your opponent knows where all your attacks are going to be coming from. You knows how to handle your deck now and just needs to hold those block zones. They can't always, and you will catch some opponents lacking and not having that block zone, but it does mean that more seasoned players will hold their mid and high blocks. If you're playing Fallen Skies, focus on the ones they can block with the mids that they don't mind taking a little bit of damage and blocking your big moves with a full block, apart from Fallen Skies, which can give itself through. So running a good range of mid, high, and low attacks is very important to make sure that you're catching your opponent off guard and that you're making sure that your zones are around. This does mean that sometimes you will have to compromise and choose attacks that may not be as good as others, but through those interactions you can find some very cool card combinations and card interactions that you hadn't thought about before. If you want to run just all highs, all mids, all lows, you can do. It's a strategy a lot of people are running. I know there's been overhaul all lows and along those lines, but variety is the spice of life, and it is a very good idea to have a variety of attack zones, mainly because it keeps your opponent guessing. If they know your attack zones, it makes you a lot easier to predict. On the opposite side of that is your block zone. If you have a typically 60 card deck, then ideally you want to be looking at having 20 of each block zone. The other thing to remember is each block on your cards has a number. That is how much gets added to the speed and your progressive difficulty in order to pass the check. If my opponent sends a 4 speed, 4 damage attack at me, and I have 2 cards in my card pool, and I have a 3 block in hand on the zone of the attack, I am going to have to block on a 4 speed, plus 2 progressive, plus 3 block mod, which means I'm blocking on a 9. And that's when it starts to get intimidating. So having a good range of block zone numbers is a great way to play, and sometimes you will run a strictly worse version of a card because it has a better block mod, or you'll run a strictly better version of a card with a good block mod because you're looking to kill. It comes down to your own personal decision, but block zones are where a lot of people tend to fail. The way that this game works is if you match the block zone to your opponent's attack zone perfectly, that is a complete block. Outside of throw and some other effects, you take no damage. You can also half block using a zone that is directly parallel to the attack zone. So if this is a mid attack, you can block it with a high, medium, or low. If it's a low attack, it can only be blocked with a mid or a low. Highs cannot block it because it's 2 degrees away. Same if it's high, it can be blocked by a mid, but it cannot be blocked by a low. If you block it with a off zone attack, so if you block a mid with a high, then you take half the damage rounded up. This is why having a good range of block zones is very important, because this will keep you alive. It will allow you to block, it will allow you to have access to more zones, and when you start to read your opponent's deck, when you start to get used to it, you can get more used to their pattern of attack, and in games 2 and 3, you can know what their kill cards are going to be and hold blocks for those cards. Other thing to do with block zones is to think about your defense. It is all well and good to have your 60 cards and go, all my foundations deal damage or give my attack speed or make them hard to deal with, and then I can kill my opponent when I draw well and when I check well, but I'm dying on the backswing. That is where your defensive cards go. This is the cards that you need to keep you alive. Although it doesn't do anything offensively, struggling with studies, Keiko's Aid, learning the standards, all very powerful defensive cards currently in standard that all let you interact with your opponent's board based on what you do. So if you block, you get to use Keiko's Aid to make their next attack harder. If you don't block, you can remove struggling with studies to say you need to play a non-attack as your next form. Or with struggling with studies, if they go into a long string, you can flip it, pick up a card and reduce your progressive, making it easier to block this next one. That's where effects like Breaker also come in. So on a block, you can make your opponent's check lower, making it harder for them to pass the next cards. And sometimes running cards that just say Breaker 2 on them is a lot better than running cards that have lots of abilities on them, because it keeps you alive and lets you play a bit of a longer game and keeps you alive. Turning a turn where your opponent was going to kill you into a turn where they have to pass because their checks got manipulated is perfect. If you are just thinking about your offense, if you're just thinking about what your deck's going to do to your opponent and not preparing for the backswing, not preparing for defense, you're going to lose games. Simple as. If you have no defense, if you cannot create a balanced deck all around, you are going to lose. And this is something that new players will get with experience. This is something they'll pick up as they play, that you'll learn how to build your decks to be more balanced for offense and defense. You'll learn what you need to do. A character such as Godzilla does not really need more damage pumped in their stage. What they need is ways to make sure their attacks hit, so increased speed, zone changing, and then what they also need is a way to stay alive on the backswing so they can come attack again. Control characters like the Joker, like Jin, they don't add damage, they do add speed, they do add more control aspects. The ways to interact with your opponent's attacks, ways to pump your attacks with damage, are great ways to bolster your character's abilities. Using foundations that complement your character are amazing, but don't forget to have some defense. Don't forget to have card draw, breakers, difficulty enhancers, card pool clogging. These are ways that you can shut your opponent down and get back to your turn, or make your opponent's turn harder and turn what was going to be a turn where your opponent killed you into a turn where you get another chance to kill your opponent. And that's where the compromises come in. You need to go, well, this is a very powerful card, but does it do everything I need it to do? Why should I run this 2-diff foundation that gives my attack 1 damage when I could be running this 2-diff foundation which gives me -2 speed on my opponent's turn, keeping me alive? Cards like Nice Try, very, very good utilized. They've got defensive and offensive ability because you can commit them in your turn and have them ready. Very, very good, very, very powerful. So sometimes you will not just be able to run a deck of pure progressing your game state. It's about slowing your opponent's game state down as well. And that's where a lot of new, inexperienced TCG players tend to fall into a trap. They do not run defense. They run pure offense, and they come across a deck which is running offense, but it's also running defense, and then they just can't get through, and then they get killed by the opponent's offense. It's a shame, but it's a learning experience. It's something that new players will develop as they go through the game. They'll get more game sense, and they'll be like, I need to start running Nice Tries, Struggling with Studies, Keiko's Aids, Faith Shield, Botan's Coaching to filter through my turn to get my defenses up, Barrier Shields to get more breaker, speed reduction, Airy Smiles to make sure that my opponent is not attacking me again, and just causing disruption to what your opponent wants to do. You do not want to just be sat there letting your opponent play solitaire, letting your opponent do whatever they want, and basically going, can I raw block this? Having ways to increase your defensive capability are very important, and even characters that are just pure aggro, that just are going die, 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 will still have that defensive twinge, or even have the sideboard be a bit more defensive if games go longer. So this isn't going to be as long as the last one, but yes, compromises to your deck do need to happen. I am one of those players that gets very sick and tired of players very quickly when they come across an issue going, oh, this card's an issue, it needs to get banned, when they haven't tried to build around it, when they haven't tried to actually be defensive. Just because a card is an issue for you does not make a card an issue. The first thing we should do is build better, grow as players, not just immediately demand cards get banned or errated or changed because we don't like them. We need to do everything we can to control these cards before UVS then steps up and go, yep, the players have done their part, they've tried. This card is still an issue. It needs to be banned. It needs to be errated. That's the way this game works. Do not take it as an insult. Do not take it as, oh, I should have known this from the start. It's a learning experience. Knowing how to manage your attack zone and block zones is very, very powerful, and that's why you'll see a lot of cards do the same thing but have different symbols and different block zones, because there are universal features that every single deck needs, such as negative speed plus damage. That is what these decks need to survive. Speed hate is very powerful and very good even for commit or flip cost. So making sure that your deck is defensive, making sure that your deck has a very good balance of block zones and attack zones is exactly how you can progress your deck from your first deck to a more competitive deck. If you look on card databases and deck builders such as UGN or Universus cards, you'll even see that they have a statistics part of the page which will tell you what block zones you're running, how many of what each block zone, how many of each attack zone, and then you can look at that and go, well, I have 40 high blocks and then 10 mid and 10 low. I need to even out those numbers, because if I run into an opponent that's running very powerful low attacks, I'm not likely to have them, seeing as I only have 1/6 of my deck being lows. And then because the other 1/6 of my deck is mids, I have a 66% chance of not being able to block low attacks, while I only have a 33% chance of blocking it, and at that point having a 16.5% chance of full blocking it. That is not, especially when you take into account that these are numbers based on the fact that you even have one in hand. The chances of you drawing a low block is very, very low. You might still need to play them to actually get foundations or play them as attacks. It goes even deeper. So the main thing I would say to do, make sure your deck is balanced, not only in its check to difficulty ratios, but also in its attack zones and block zones, because to put it bluntly, it's nobody else's fault but your own if your deck loses because you did not have that block, if you're not running enough of it. That's the way it works. You need to be able to block attacks, you need to be able to reduce them to the point where you can. So think about what your opponent might be trying to do. Think about the way that your opponent's going to be playing. And if you're worried about a particular deck, play that deck. The best way to know how to beat a deck is to play it, learn it, and know what its weaknesses are. Be balanced, build better, and adapt your deck to the meta that you're going to be facing, whether that be local or regionals. Anticipate, adapt, evolve, and win. That is how we play this game. That is how we're going to play this game. And we will take down games because we anticipate, adapt, and grow. I'll catch you on the next one. If I have missed anything else out about deck building, please do hit me up. I'll be happy to do a part 3 to this series. But I just wanted to come in here and touch on balancing your deck, the compromises of your deck, and the zones of your attack and blocks to make sure that you stay alive and you get the W. Let me know how you're getting on. Let me know if these are actually useful to you. I know Reddit actually really found the first part useful, so hopefully found this next part useful. And I will catch you all in the next one.